So I think I was frozen when you guys were talking about the share screen. Are one of you able to share? Or
Yep.
did you want me to? Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, you want me to? Okay.
Go ahead, because I only have one right now that I'll be able to do at the moment that I'm aware of. So
Yeah, and I'm down to one monitor because I shipped all my other ones away. All right. So good morning, afternoon, evening for everyone who is joined. Welcome to this month's Adobe Champions office hours. Just a note, as always, this session is going to be recorded. It is just the speakers and the presentation that is being recorded. The chat is not recorded. So if you have any comments or questions, feel free to post those in the chat. This session will be available on the user group YouTube playlist. I have put a link for that in the chat and pinned it to the top. We do have some pre-submitted questions, but if you have any other questions, feel free to put them in the chat at any point and we will answer them time permitting. And my name is Mandy George. I'm a digital analyst at Best Buy Canada. And I'll pass it over to the others for introductions.
I guess I'll go because otherwise we're just going to have silence. So I'm Jennifer Dungan, and I am the Optimization Manager Analytics at Torstar up in Canada. And you probably haven't heard of Torstar, but you may have heard of the Toronto Star, which is our flagship product. But we focus mostly on print media, newspapers, but we have a lot of other digital ventures, and I handle the analytics for everything.
And my name is Jeff Plumer. I am the manager of digital e-commerce analytics over at Kroger Personal Finance. If you haven't heard of Kroger, we are the largest grocery retailer in the United States. Kroger Personal Finance, we are the one of the largest alternative revenue. Oh, I always get myself tongue twisted on this one. Where alternative revenue sources for Kroger. We do gift cards, money services, and credit cards. And I do the digital side of that, so digital analytics for Kroger Personal Finance.
All right. So I guess we should just dive right in.
Yep.
Okay, so the question that was submitted was, could you kindly cover end-to-end tracking from a referral URL? And to get more details, specifically, how does Adobe Analytics receive UTM enriched URL? How does it parse through those and store them? Where are they stored? And how are they referenced upon a conversion? How does AA connect that attribution to the conversion? And curveball, what happens if there are multiple subdomains and forwarding these attributes becomes required? So that's a pretty loaded question. So the first thing is, how does it process UTMs? Well, that's entirely up to you. Because so Adobe usually natively works with its own CID, which is an all-encompassing value, but then you still have to determine for your own business the order that each of those values comes in so that you can parse it correctly. That is not to say that you cannot use UTMs. In fact, we pretty much exclusively use UTMs. I know that Jeff uses CIDs, so we can speak to both of those aspects. But when you process it, again, in your launch, you would actually go in and, in my case, I would create data elements for each of the UTM parameters, pull those in. And then what I normally do is I will stitch those together into a string, which is in a very specific order, and I will pass that to my s.campaign value. I will also, in my own implementation, track each of those individually in their own ebook bars. It's just easier if I want to look for one specific item in workspace and not have to worry about the 500,000 unique values. I can pull those out. And then, of course, there is marketing channels. And marketing channels, you can look for specific key factors within your URL query strings. UTM medium is CPC for your paid media, or UTM source is Facebook, and build those in. And again, we can go into so much detail in marketing channels, but to make sure we have time for other questions. Marketing channels basically allows you to create a filter down bucket list where you start with your primary rules, catch items, it goes to the next level, it catches items, it goes to the next level, it catches items, it goes to the next level, it catches items. And then those are retained for whatever expiry you have selected. So normally maybe a 7-day or a 30-day attribution. Your S campaigns also has its own attribution, and your individual EVARs could also have their own separate attribution. And essentially what happens there is that Adobe actually remembers that at the server level for the user. So you don't have to pass those between subdomains. As long as your traffic going from your main domain to your subdomain to a different subdomain back to the main, as long as those are all part of the same suite and are all being properly identified with the visitor IDs, so it's the same user being identified across all of those sites, Adobe will maintain those values for you. You don't actually have to pass them. And in fact, you don't want to pass them because there is both an instance of and then the maintained or persisted value. And if you were to forward those and then try to track them again, that will treat it as a new instance, which would actually inflate your instances of. So you actually want to let Adobe do its thing, do the stitching in behind for you. So it's really, really easy. Jeff, did you have anything to add? And I'm just going to show, I just made a little visual showing a page with a UTM, going to page 2, going to page 3, which is a subdomain, page 4, a different subdomain, and then a conversion event. You see that the instance tracks the hit where the UTMs are set and then does not track on any others. But on the processed value, it will do hits for the entirety of your expiry period, whether that is 1 year, 7 days, 30 days, until a certain event is hit, or whatever you have actually chosen for your attribution model. Jeff, Mandy, do you have any additions?
So, I mean, addition wise, I mean, so the thing is Jennifer very well touched on a number of things, like she said, as it relates to campaign IDs, UTMs are definitely not an out of the box, solution that you would use, but again, you have the ability to use them however you would like. CIDs, UTMs, or whatever. So it's just a matter of how you want to set up your marketing channels, your marketing channel rules to capture things. So, but then I would also say, your attribution, I would definitely go out and look at how you want to have your attribution work. I would actually kind of recommend reading a brand new tutorial out there that I just wrote. I'm not going to plug something that I just wrote that's out there, but there's new capabilities out there with attribution that I think that are really that are really worth reading, because the way that Adobe is even recommending that we use attribution now is different than it was. So I would keep that in mind as you're thinking through attribution. And then and again, Jen just said, I mean, we could spend a whole, we could spend a whole session just talking about attribution. So I would go out there and take a look at the newer documentation that's out there, because it's really pretty robust what they're doing now with how you can set up your attribution against marketing channels. So I would definitely take a second look at what's going on there.
Right. And I should also have mentioned that you can also apply custom attribution to your your EVARs and things like that. So if you were to say set up a visit level attribution in your like expiry in your EVAR, but then you want to say, oh, but what's happening after 2 weeks? What's happening after a month? You can actually create a custom attribution on that and actually look at the results of that. So if no other value has come in since then, you can actually see the last touch, or even, I know we don't really usually like it, but participation model or a linear model or any of the various models that are available, you can actually go and you can create that for a much longer period than what your EVAR has been set to recall. So Adobe's got a lot of fancy logic that you can apply after the fact. So if you haven't set up the attribution to field every person in your organization's questions, you can actually go back and you can actually make use of those. All right, I see a bunch of questions coming in. Mandy, are you watching? Are they in relation to this, or are they new questions?
So some of them are new questions.
Okay. Is there any questions that that are asking us to expand upon what we've been talking about, just so we can touch upon those before moving on?
There's a question about making dashboards programmatically, a question about having multiple brands. You know, we can probably talk about this one in here. If you have various brands in the same report suite, what's the best way to isolate the journey to a particular brand so you're only seeing the marketing channel related to one particular brand and ignore the others?
Right. You know, that also depends on are people actually hitting the multiple brands within the same session? But you're right, when you have like a 1 week or a 7 week attribution, that gets tricky because that user and within the same suite still has items. I'm sure there's a way with fancy segmentation where you could actually say, did the instance of the marketing channel hit on site A or site B, then maintain it. Otherwise, don't within your reports. I would actually have to go and test that out, but that would be my first instinct. Jeff, have you had to deal with that?
I would say between, you just said fancy segmentation. The only thing that I could think of would be virtual report suite approach would be the only thing that I could think of right off the bat.
Well, yeah, well, obviously virtual report suites, but I'm still wondering if the marketing channel, which is set at point A on site A, and then when you go to the other sites, that marketing channel may still be forwarded in. So your traffic would be on site B, but your marketing channel will still have come from site A, which is why I was thinking segmentation.
That's a very that's a wonky hypothetical. I'm not sure. I'd have to see it.
Yeah. Yeah. Unfortunately, that's something that I've never had to worry about per se. Like I am using a global suite. I've got 30 sites going into one, but from a marketing channel perspective, I've never actually had to worry about separating them out.
Yeah.
But as I said, I think play around with segmentation. If you run into problems, Experience League. There's lots of people there.
Yeah, the way that I see this happening. I mean, technically, U.S. Bank is doing this now with Kroger, and the way they're doing it is with a virtual report suite.
Okay.
So.
Yeah, VRSs can be pretty powerful to make sure that you're only getting the data that you want to analyze.
Yep.
Yeah.
I'm going to read another question from the chat.
Okay.
We have an EVAR to capture the ECID. This allows us to stitch and join on other attributes in our data lake. We are seeing, however, that the post MCID column is more thoroughly capturing the ECID. This created issues with comparing data from our data lake and what we see in the same workspace. Any suggestions on getting them to align?
So you're saying that the ECID, and
So these are the questions from Damon.
Yeah, I'm just trying to figure out, like, when you say like the post MCID versus the, like, are those two separate like, not just the instance of and the persistence value of the same value. You're saying actually two separate columns. They're different. I guess it really depends on what your EVAR is set to capture. I mean, and how you're capturing it. I'd probably have to see the data to really understand this issue, unless you can type in very, very quickly. If you're talking about just are you talking about the same EVAR being the non-post and the post, or are you talking about two completely separate fields mismatching?
Two separate fields mismatching. Okay. I think he said correct.
Okay. Now that's interesting. I
mean, the first thing that comes to mind for me, because I know we've dealt with data lakes in my old company, is if you have if you're using a VRS, make sure you've replicated that logic in your data lake, because I know that's one thing that we sometimes see is any segments that you've got applied in your VRS, make sure you're using that as well. Yeah, other than that.
Now, Mary, also ask,
one.
Yeah, how are you actually capturing the ECID into your EVAR? Because if you're using the what they call dynamic variables trick, which is just capital D equals MID, it should match 100% because that's the value that's being sent on the call. If, however, you are trying to do some sort of cookie extraction, you may be failing on that particular extraction, and that may be causing some differences between the system. Or if you're on Web SDK, I don't know, because I haven't actually used Web SDK yet. So understanding how you're actually getting your ECID value, I think, would go a long way to understanding why the mismatch might be. SDK. Okay. So it's entirely possible that I'm going to assume that you are probably, okay, yeah, you're using the get var EC. Yeah. Okay. I'm going to assume that you're probably using the mixed method of the ECID, which is still storing the first party cookie with the ECID value, so that as you're transitioning between traditional and Web SDK and to other sites for forwarding events, there might be some kind of oddity happening there where the ECID isn't necessarily being set. Unfortunately, well, no, I understand. Yeah, you can't share images, but that's a tricky one. I haven't had a lot of experience with Web SDK, and I'm pretty sure that neither Jeff or Mandy have gone to Web SDK either, because it's kind of bleeding edge technology. That's my next big project that I'm going to be starting to tackle, but it's fun. Yeah. Yes, so I've heard.
If you are wanting to share images, you can always make a post in Experience League. Jen is super active on there. The rest of us try and be active, but Jen is like the rock star of Experience League. Mm-hmm. So if you post a question in there, chances are she will answer it for you. And I know you can share images there. So that might be a good way to continue that discussion.
I would say definitely to follow up out there, because
And hopefully there's also somebody else on Experience League who actually has been using the Web SDK who might go, oh, I know 100% what your problem is. Do this. So fingers crossed that we'll get you sorted out, and hopefully everyone can learn from your issue and avoid that as they move forward with that web SDK.
Yeah, that's the benefit of Experience League. You get lots of people that can answer your question instead of just the three of us in our limited experiences. I am going to move us on to, there were two more questions in the chat. First one, hello guys, good to see you all. I'm curious if there's a way to create AA dashboards programmatically and or make templates portable. Use case, quickly recreate relatively small dashboards and semi-automate management of those. So this one, I think we're talking about saving dashboards as templates here.
Right.
Which I know Experience is a thing that you can do. So when you go to save your dashboard, if you can click on project, Jen.
Yep.
So I'm trying to remember what the button name is.
Okay. Now there.
So it is, I'm trying to remember.
I thought it was save at.
Well, no, I don't think it's save as. I'm trying to remember how to save it as a template.
Yeah, I haven't used that function in a while.
Igor's saying it's not about templates. Huh.
It's been a while. There is a way to save as template.
Yeah. And Igor's saying
it's lost that. But maybe it's under the save as. No.
No. Because I haven't used it in a while, but I know we do have custom templates.
Yeah.
Oh, is it company report? I think it's company report.
No. Company report just shares it into the company folder. You know what? I bet you we don't have permissions to save as templates within the.
This one.
Okay,
that's right.
So, ignoring the fact that you can't actually see it, there should be a save as template if you have the permissions to save as template. So if you don't see that option, make sure that if you have access or your administrator goes into the admin console and make sure you have the rights to save as a template. I actually had to remove that from most of my company because people were saving like full on, like repeated reports as templates. And I'm like, no, please stop. So I had to remove that function until I can teach them better what a template should and shouldn't be. Now, one thing that you should be aware of in a template, if you have a segment which is applied up here, like an ad hoc segment, and you save it as a template and somebody opens it up and modifies it, it will modify every single report because your segments, even when you save as or make a copy of, are tied to the same ID. So I've seen this problem come up several times in the Experience League. When you open up your segment, you will notice in the URL there is a specific ID. Let's just use 123 as a simple example. 123, when the report gets replicated over and over and over again, 123 is still the segment that is linked to all. Right now, there is no way to copy an ad hoc segment. But the reason for that being is that if you multiple reports which have slightly different variations, and somebody needs to go in and make a minor tweak, they don't have to update every single report. They just go in, update the one segment, and it will apply to all. So it's both, it's kind of a double-edged sword. It's there to help you, but it also can hurt you if somebody goes in and completely changes the segment. It will break everyone else's reports. So rule of thumb, if you are saving as a template, make sure that you're using kind of like segments that non-admins don't have access to make, and put a note in about how to create specific segments for seeing this data or that data, this asset, that asset, this marketing channel, this whatever. Like, just make sure that those report specific segments aren't built into your template that could potentially cause problems.
So Jen, just an update. Igor commented again. We misunderstood the question a bit. He wants more of an emphasis on programmatic way and portability across orgs.
Right. Unfortunately, if you have multiple companies or multiple organizations,
Yeah.
No good way to do that. Adobe has not yet provided that sort of functionality, except there is the API 2.0. Apparently, you should be able to download, like you'll use the API to retrieve information about reports and templates, and then you should be able to build those again using the API. This is in theory. I have not done it, but yeah, API is probably the only way that you're going to be able to make those copies.
Yeah. All right, just in the interest of time, moving on to the next question. There is one more in the chat that's fairly quick to go through by, and I'm sorry if I pronounce your name wrong. I think it's Shamina. What is the difference between props and evars, and when do you use that? So I can go over that one there. Evars persist for a certain amount of time, whereas props do not. So when you're creating an EVAR, you need to set up the rules for it, for how long you want it to persist and when you want the value to expire. So you want to use that when you need values that are going to be remembered. So if you've got a retail site and you want to know where a customer added their product to cart, you would capture that in an EVAR that then persists throughout the visit until they make a purchase. And so when they place the order, you can go back and see how they found all of their products. Props, on the other hand, expire after the hit that they happen. So a good way to, sort of explain these, I'll use the analogy that my former supervisor used to use. Shout out to Kat for this one. So EVARs are like a piece of gum on the sidewalk. As you're walking down the street and you step on a piece of gum, every step you take is now going to have that piece of gum stuck to your shoe. And as you're walking down the street, you can step on multiple pieces of gum. And that is the EVAR persisting and getting multiple values throughout your trip. And then at the end of the day, when you get home and you throw out your shoe, that's like your success event. And you can attribute it to the first piece of gum, the last piece of gum, or all of the gum that's on your shoe. So that's the allocation.
Along the way.
Yeah. Props, on the other hand, are like a banana peel. You step on the banana peel and you slip and fall. But once you get back up and keep moving, the banana peel is no longer impacting you. So that's kind of the way I was taught how the difference between props and EVARs.
I will add one caveat to that, like great analogy. There is one other fundamental difference between props and EVARs, which may dictate using an EVAR over a prop, and that is the number of characters. Props are limited to 100 characters. EVARs are limited to 255. So if you need to store large values, such as URLs, you can actually use an EVAR for that. Just make sure that you set it to a hit level persistence so that it will work like a prop, but it will give you that added length of value that you can actually make use of. And list bars are even are even more special. And
you love list bars, yes.
Yeah. Since you are bringing up list bars, for those who don't know, you actually have only 3 list bars available to you, but each item passed in the list has its own 255 character limit. So you can actually pass in tons and tons and tons of data into your list bar with a delimiter beyond just 255 characters for the entire string, which will allow you to capture lots of things. So we use list bars to track our article tags. So newspapers, we have lots of tags, this line of story and that, and this and that, we have tons of items. We'll actually use that to track those values so that we can capture all of the tags. And then if somebody says, hey, I want to see all the articles that were related to election, boom, I look for the election tag and I can pull up every single story. So,
and then also with EVARs, you've got merchandising EVARs that are tied to specific products, and those
There's your can of
You know,
worms.
yeah, though that's a different can of worms. There's different ways to set merchandising EVARs. But yeah, they tie specifically to products.
Honestly, I think this is another topic that we could
That's
probably
an
talk for an
entire
hour.
different topic. Yeah. But that's basically the difference is EVARs tend to persist, props expire after the initial hit.
Yep. And I see, thank you, David. Yeah, you're adding lots of great value here. You're right. You can do like little mini list var so long as you're within your 255 characters. You can use classifications to parse those out. You can do, lots of different things with concatenation. So there's tons of tricks that you can actually do to extend the items that come out of the box.
Yeah.
And classifications, yeah.
Yeah. Classification's a whole other beast.
Let's
move on with some of the pre-submitted questions because we could go down rabbit holes of any of these for an entire hour probably. So the next one, I believe, in Workspace, is there a way to trend weekly year-over-year comps over time?
Right. So technically speaking, there is range column. So what I did is I just did a very simple report. I created a custom date equal to this year, but for last year. And how I did that segment or that date range, let me just pull this up, is I a custom rolling date to say start of current year minus 52 weeks, start of current week minus 52 weeks, so that essentially in my preview, I can see it's January 2nd, 2022 to May 14th, 2022, which is, equal to like, I'm not trying to pull in all of last year and getting, data for last year that hasn't yet occurred in this year. And then basically I've got them listed side by side. So even though this says January 1st, 2022, like the week of, you can see that this is the equivalent week starting January 2nd, and I can see the data. Unfortunately, the percent change column math doesn't actually work in this case. I really wish it does. I think that's worthy of a feature request or an idea for Adobe to try and deal with, because it would be lovely to actually see a percent up and down based on these weekly trends. But from a visual perspective, you can actually graph this data into a line or an area chart, which will look when it finally loads, something like this. So you can actually see your last year's data in red and your this year's data in yellow, how everything is comparing.
So just to add on to that, if you want to actually get the comps in the graph, what I do is instead of having week in the table, I would bring in a segment like all visits. And then if you don't have a date going down the rows, if it's like a segment like all visits or a page name or something that's not time related, then when you add your time period column, it'll actually let you add the percent change column, and then you can graph that percent change column. So Jen, do you want to quickly just replace week with all visits, or new table?
Was that
actually, I'll just duplicate this. Duplicate visualization.
And then, replace week with all visits. And then for the page view column, right click, compare time periods. Just go with whatever the default is for it, just in the sake of time.
Okay. Oh, shoot. I should have. Your time period.
Prior 19 weeks is fine because we're just looking at how to do it.
Yeah.
And then right click on percent change and visualize.
Aha.
And line graph. That's my preferred one. You can do it with any. And then you set your granularity to week.
And look at that. It even created a date range, which was equal to the one I created.
Yeah. Yeah. And then just get rid of the columns you don't want.
Which is
the first three.
Yeah. Oh.
And this is sample data, so it's going to look weird. But now you've got your weekly comps.
I'm not sure because this is all coming out at 0% right now.
Oh, is it? Hang on, let me.
I was gonna say I've done this within my own report suite. It works just fine.
Yeah, it might be because this is sample data.
Might be.
Yeah.
Caveat to this demo.
It might very well. Well, no, because the data should have been different because we saw very obviously different page views here. But you're right. It may be something weird going on because it's sample data. All right, yeah. Try it on your own. If it doesn't work, experience.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah, because mine did the percent change and all that stuff just perfectly fine within my. Because I went to do it here and I encountered the same error within the sandbox.
Yeah. Oh, that's weird. Yeah, it's doing weird. Okay. Oh no, I had that. It worked right before.
Did they change something in the latest release?
I don't know. Okay.
All right. Which question do you want us to address next, given that we have 20 minutes left?
I would say the next one we can probably talk about, like, very briefly, where do we see the analytics platform evolving? It's hard. We don't really have an insight to Adobe's roadmap. So that's one of the things. All of us here are Adobe users. We don't actually work for Adobe. So we have, very limited insight into where it's going, what they're thinking. But yeah, I know, the future of what they're trying to do is they're trying to get everybody over to CJA. But beyond that, I'm not really sure. If you guys have anything to add to that one.
I'm just typing an answer. So Jeff, if you want to talk about it right now.
So that's the same thing along that road. Yeah. The roadmap that we have been seeing, and that's what they've been speaking to, is they're very much pushing towards CJA. That's the best way that I can answer that particular question.
Yeah.
They do keep adding small features to Adobe Analytics. So, but that's about as forward speaking as I can be.
Right. Yeah. Unfortunately, we keep seeing all these new features coming up for CJA, and we're very vocal about we need that in analytics, please.
I can tell you, and I don't know if anybody saw it yet. They did just release a new feature yesterday where you can share where you can share to anyone. You can literally share to anyone. I will say though, say that with a big caveat: be careful, because if you share a workspace to anyone, you're literally sharing it to anyone. There is no security behind that. So if you share a workspace to anyone, they can turn around and share that link to anybody else. So there's nothing, there's no email tied to that. There is no credential tied to that. So if you were to take a workspace, share it to somebody, they could take that link and post it out to the internet, and anybody could look at it. Now, the cool thing about that is, though, since Jen, if you hit that share link up there, does it right now give you the ability to share a read only? Nope, it doesn't show it there. But if I were to share from mine, there is the ability to enable or disable the link. So you could disable a link, but
Right.
just
Yeah,
want people to understand the ability to do that.
Right. That feature is probably, since it's only just started, it's probably being rolled out systematically to groups of users
To
rather
different
than
report suites.
Yeah. So if you don't already have it, it's probably coming.
Yeah. So but it is systematically being rolled out to people's report suites. I just ran into it yesterday, very excited at first, and then I realized the ramifications.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. And I think this last comment was specifically about the how do I do this and how do we prevent this? I need to disable like globally for my org. In theory, because this is such a new feature and I haven't had a chance to deal with it, in theory, there should be the option within the admin console to restrict that access to share out reports. And if it's not there, that is the first idea that we need to push out for a security purpose, because you don't want just anyone in your organization sharing anything out. You want to make sure that only people that have that confidentiality, like thought process behind the data is handling that.
Yeah. Cool. Next question. This is a great one. What's the best way to analyze page visited prior to access event or a specific page?
Right. So there's lots of different ways to go about this depending on what you're actually doing. So our flow diagrams, which you can actually pull in and take a look at. Basically,
somebody just
put your success in.
This actually answers two questions. Somebody had brought up flow visualization too, so this answers two questions.
Yeah, and somebody says I'd like to analyze the flow. I know the flow is. I honestly miss the old full pathing reports. I prefer them over flow diagrams 100%. I very rarely use flow diagrams because I don't know. I find this busy. I don't know about you guys, but I find this very, very hard to use.
Yeah.
But I mean, it is an option, like where you can actually look at. It does serve a purpose. It doesn't serve all purposes. Now, the other thing that I did was in my table, and unfortunately, this does not take order of operation into account. Here, I just did standard page views, and here I actually did a segment of page views before online orders. And within that segment, I essentially looked at visits and used a sequential segment only so that I could apply the only before sequence logic. I just said page view, then online order exists. I really wish that there was an only before sequence without the use of then, but it is what it is. So I just did some very, very stupid, just page view, then an online order, which should bring me out all actions in the visit that happened before the order occurred, but nothing afterwards. And so this is the result that I actually got. You can see that these pages are much lower than just general pages on whatever. And then this is obviously mixed between app and website. The way this data set is sampled, you could always add segmentation to say not my app, like just my website, just my app, and clean it up even more. But there is technically this flow. Now, I believe a few years ago, I think it was it Jen Kuntz showed how to do a flow like basically a replication of the pages, the page paths in a table. I do not remember those steps. I would have to go and look it up, but it was really impressive the way she used segmentation to create a really nice table of data. So I'm gonna go try and look that up, and I'll post it into the comments with this video of the YouTube if I can find it. And then the other option is you're only looking for the page before, which you probably aren't. You're probably looking at the whole flow. But if you do happen to be looking at just the page before your success event, there is previous item table. So I threw out a sample down here. Hang on. Next to previous item. Now, unfortunately, you can't actually throw like a metric like online orders or whatever in. But what you could do is if you have a thank you page, I just use the next page for purchase thank you page, which then built out that I can modify and adjust if I need to, but it will say, here's the pages that were hit right before the purchase thank you page. And it gives you a bunch of different information about, oh, sorry, this was next page. It should have been previous page. This is what happens when you're doing things at midnight. But essentially, when this panel, it'll ask you, do you want the next item? Do you want the previous item? And what dimension are you actually looking for that hit before? Jeff, do you have any other tips, or Mandy, any other tips for what pages or hits happened before your order, or before your success event, I should say?
No, I like the.
No,
I mean, I've used the sequential segments before.
Yeah.
I personally like those flow diagrams. I like, how when you hover over them, like it'll highlight the different paths that happen. I'm personally a fan of those.
I've got a few issues with this, mostly because, again, I work in a news organization, so we have many, many, many articles, and and I mean, if I have like the actual article coming out here, I'd never see anything. If I truncate it down to just page type article, then I find the flow diagram gets a little wonky, because if someone goes article to article to article to article, I kind of get this weird, like the data is multiplying in here. I've never been able to get it to actually just show me article purchase in the proper granularity. But that's me. I used to be able to get that in the full page flows in the old reports. So, but again, depending on what you're using it is absolutely usable. It all depends on so many factors and the specifics of what you're trying to do.
Yep, I would say being in the in an e-com organization, we use the fallout quite a lot just to see where people fall out of our flows. So it just really depends on personal preference.
Right.
But yeah.
Yeah, I think some of the visualizations are polarizing. You either love it or you hate it. There's just not in between.
Oh, definitely.
Oh, yeah, and cohort tables will tell you if people are coming back to your site after like at a weekly granularity, or making orders weekly granularity. It's not so much about all the pages or the pages they hit before, but yes, cohort tables are definitely another valuable resource in your arsenal.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm working on answering questions in the chat.
Thank you. Yep, I see that. Another one that came in was, how can I see real-time user information just like Google Analytics? This is actually an interesting one. This is a little known fact, but you can actually have 3 real-time reports within your suite, and you can access those through. Let me just open this up. And hopefully real-time reports is actually, no, real-time reports should be enabled in here. I checked when it loads. Oh God, yes, I see. Yeah, absolutely be cool if it was added in workspace. Hopefully it's something they're working on, because the real-time reports haven't been updated in years. I think it's time for a facelift. I absolutely 100% agree with that comment that, yeah, real-time reports in workspaces would be awesome. And then we wouldn't be limited to 3. Come to main page under reports, or you can find it through reports. But since that, and this one should remain, this is probably the way you should be looking at it. Yes, there is feature requests. If you go to the Experience League and go to the Ideas tab, that is a place to put in any feature requests or ideas you have for improving how the system works. Adobe will look at stuff that gets upvoted a lot, though even if it doesn't get upvoted a lot, somebody might be perusing through it and go, oh, that's a really cool idea. I think I'll work on that. But we've seen several ideas get posted there that have actually made it to product. So if you go to here, and I believe it's under engagement real time. So here's engagement real time, or you can just search for real time. Now, when you open up real time, because there's only one configured for this site, it's going to pull that report up. It just apps here. So this is a content real-time report. You can configure each of these in the admin panel so you can actually create up to 3 real-time reports. So if you go to admin panel, report suites, find your suite, and then go to edit settings, under general, there is a real-time option where you can actually configure it. But here is a real-time report that is showing you right now the last 15 minutes. You can actually change this. It'll show you the pages in the last 15 minutes, what the page views in the last 15 minutes, the page views for today, what the change is. It will show you like site sections. But again, all of this is configurable. You can actually change this. This is just the default report and referring domains. And if I were to look at this, you can actually change it to last 30 minutes, last hour, last 2 hours, which will give you a real-time view at some of your metrics. Anything else to add? All right. The next one. Is there a way Adobe reports based on users also had information of gender and age like GA? Okay, first off, I am going to be brutally honest here, but GA's demographic data is about as accurate as putting up a dartboard with ages and genders and throwing a dart at it and saying that's what you are. It is really, really stupid. How they determine age and gender is based on your interests. So a few years ago, there was a site that said, that you could check, who does Google think you are? Well, I came back as a 20-something-year-old male, likely because I play a lot of video games and I like sci-fi. So I do not trust that data one bit. I actually kind of wish that it would not provide that information, because I'd rather know information than just guesses. Now, that said, if you actually have, say, a login system on your site and you are collecting information such as age and gender, assuming people don't lie, because, it's the internet, people lie all the time, but assuming you are collecting that data, you could potentially pass that information into your data as props or evars based on what has been actually collected in your system. And then you can create segments to pull together similar age groups or similar types of users that way. But I find that data, even though we don't trust people 100%, there should be enough realism there that it's more accurate than what GA has. Unfortunately, it only works for logged in users. So if they're not logged in, you won't know who they are. All right, anything to add? You too? Nope.
Nope.
Okay. And we have 3 minutes left.
Probably got time for maybe one more question. Any questions that were not answered, we will pass over to the June office hours group. So if your question wasn't answered here, we will get to it in the next office hours.
Right. Yep. I think this one we can probably do. To undergo a particular journey, the best option for this would be to create a fallout. So looking at key factors, user did this, user did this, user did this, user did this. You can add in the steps into your fallout. So one where I said person hit home, viewed an article, went to purchase step 1, went to purchase step 2, and then did a thank you. And it will actually show you what the fallout is of this. Now, you might be going, yeah, but if somebody didn't, like, if you're not starting with homepage, if you're starting with, your actual purchase flow, you may have a much smaller subset of users that start the purchase flow or even are eligible for the purchase flow than your entire subset, your entire world of people. You can actually get rid of this first step so that you're only looking at the fallout starting from that initial page. And this makes things a little bit better on your rates of churn and retention. You can also set this up on visit instead of visitor. There's options up here. So I've just done visit, but you could easily do visitors that do action before getting to your conversion. If you actually want to break this out into more detail into, say, a freeform table, you can actually create segments, touch points. So you could actually create segments for all and bring them into a freeform table, column after column after column after column. One of the questions I see quite often is, somebody looks at homepage, articles, like all the steps in their table, but the numbers don't match up with this. And that is because in their table, they're only looking at the page view or the hit in isolation. They're not looking at it with the fallout. Fallout meaning that only people who hit articles after hitting the homepage are included here. The purchase step 1, only people who hit articles and homepage. So it is absolutely order specific. So if you create those segments from these steps, then the numbers will just let it do the value segment. Page equals this, then page view equals that, then this, then that. Out yourself, or just create them from your fallout. Look at specific paths through the system, and don't worry if there are when you have eventual path, if there are pages in between this, it will still include them. I believe you can actually say next hit. So if you want to restrict your fallout to this, then this, then this, then this, you can do that, but just be careful that you don't miss any hits in between, because that can really throw your fallout out of whack.
All right, I think we are at the top of the hour. So thank you for everyone who attended office hours. Thank you to Jen and Jeff for all of your insights. If you haven't already signed up for the office hours user group, make sure that you do join that. That way you get notified for all of our future events. We haven't set the date for June yet, but we will be setting that within the next week or so. So if you are a part of the user group, you will get a notification when that is set up. and we will try and continue answering the questions we didn't get to today there, as well as any new questions that are submitted. And as always, check out Experience League. It's a great place to be.
Right. And often we can spend a lot more time there because there are conversations that will sometimes go on for days or weeks as you work through items. So it's a little bit more in depth than what we can cover in an hour.
Yeah.
All right.
Cool. I have